Hi, everybody. Let's make sure everything is working. And let's see. Wait a few minutes. This is day 1737. Think so. They start to blend, y'all. They start to blend because time's going so fast. So much evidence is coming in. We're sitting on a robust, my neighbor, a robust mountain of evidence. Um, and we have just keep adding to it. We keep adding to it. As you saw yesterday, we posted the marriage certificate license up from Alexis Mayella to Brian Blake Crucius, the brother of Patrick Crucius, and that brother was living in El Paso the entire time. And so here we are at, can you believe it? It's just like, and they got married during the whole trial, not the trial, the federal case. They never wanted to go to trial. So we're going to talk about that today. On day 1737. You cannot get through that many days doing live streams day in and day out. And I think I've taken 2 days really, and that is Good Fridays. I think the last 2 years on Good Friday, I haven't had a live stream. So we've been on this constantly, collecting information, documenting it, putting it together in the timeline, confirming it or debunking it. From the beginning, there was a lot to debunk because of all of the lies that we were told. There was a lot of lies, a lot of lies. And so we've been busy debunking, trying to sort all of that out, and get to the truth, and get to the truth so we could get to the truth about Richard. And we have submitted what we knew, the evidence that was confirmed, and we submitted it. And so Richard, on April 24th, 2024, they had no other choice, okay? Y'all, they did not want to do it, okay? They're not benevolent. The Army's not benevolent. They didn't want to do it, especially during the Biden years. And, but they had no choice, because of all of your help, because of so many others that are anonymous, that helped to bring all the evidence together. They had, and then just from our investigation, all of the evidence we collected, they had to declare Richard deceased. There was a lot of gnashing of teeth and crying about that, because when we received the paperwork, it declared that it was on Fort Bliss. It was on Fort Bliss. He died on Fort Bliss. And, like private investigators have told us, that, there's only so many options in this case. And we've debunked every option. We've debunked every option except for murder. And murdered on Fort Bliss, um, absolutely has been confirmed. The murder on Fort Bliss has been confirmed of a whistleblower. And of course, Captain Yoshida, Micah Yoshida, was shaking and crying on the phone. And of course, Command Sergeant Major Jake Jakovitz, he was shaking so much, that we nicknamed him Behind the Scenes, until we understood his very evil part in all of this. We called him Shaky Jake. Shaky Jake. Um, and many, 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 I mean, y'all, it was huge. They were absolutely shaking. And that confirmed to us that this was very, very serious and that this was a cover up. And of course, it was right during the real shake up. And it wasn't shook up enough. It wasn't shook up enough for Vanessa Guillen, but it was shaking, and they were in damage control. And that's why we have received um, confirmation that Lieutenant General Sean Bernabe ordered the obstruction and interference in our son's case, meaning, even with his body and murder weapons and everything. He ordered the obstruction and interference in our son's case. And there's lots of evidence of what he did with Christmas time at the Afghanistan mock village there, and what happened with Nadal Baim, the father-in-law of Lieutenant Colonel Bradford Bugado in the G3 of the 32nd ADCOM, his connections with Kyla Cardona, his name being Sean Cardona Bernabe, and his connections to the El Paso area, um, and his intentions. His intentions were absolutely criminal, absolutely criminal. And so instead of, I don't, I could go on for hours and hours and talk about all of this. Thank you for coming on. But the main point for tonight, because of General Garrett, of course, and I don't talk about her enough, Lieutenant General Donna Martin, of course, General McConville, of course, General Mealy. I've been having people, contacting and saying, look, what about Mealy? What about, and, it's just so sad because they're absolutely right. What about Austin? What about Christine Warmouth? I called her Christine Warmouth. Um, oh, and I don't like to call people names. It's just that people need to know how evil these people are and what they've done to our country. And um, it, 1,737 days of collecting evidence. And we can tell you that first and foremost, and this is, not trying to be a Trump supporter, even though I'm wearing the hat. Um, this is not from that position, even though I wear the hat. Um, this is from evidence that we have collected, evidence that was in the news. And it's so sad that I, have to report that there was a mutiny in our military. There was a mutiny in our military. There is absolutely we know that there's the war machine, the military industrial complex. We know that. We know that they make a lot of money off of going to war. The banks make a lot of money off of financing both sides of a war. We know that. That's historical. That's all through history. We know, but you just don't realize how evil and how organized, because human resources has a big part in this, and of course, Congress, because this implicates Congress, because those generals would not be generals without the Senate Arms Committee approving their stars, right? That's where they get their stars. And so they have organized um, a real network of theft, of theft. And, probably a couple years ago or whatever. I think a lot of people would say, oh, no, that's a conspiracy, even though I like the word conspiracy because it actually happens. And in this case, absolutely, there's been conspiracies like the conspiracy, the scheming to remove Yvonne Rosales, right? That was absolutely a conspiracy. The conspiracy to withhold the information that Michael Mayella, the manager for the federal courthouse there in El Paso, his daughter is marrying the brother of Patrick Crusius, and they're scheming and conspiracy with the media to hide that and to hide the fact that his son was in the DA's office with James Montoya, with Jaime Esparza, was in the FBI office, the El Paso field office that was investigating the Walmart mass shooting in the Patrick Crusius case, that the Mayella son was at the Walmart cybersecurity, Walmart cyber, working for Walmart cybersecurity with access to all the security cameras and everything. Um, that was a conspiracy to hide that. That was a scheming, whatever you want to call it, for because the media absolutely had the information, because it was through the media that we even found the hint of it. So they gave the hint of it, and then if you didn't know, if you hadn't spent 1,700 days investigating all of this, then you would just pass over it and you wouldn't even notice it. But you know, we catch things because we know these cases so well, and um, it's hard to explain to people that are new coming on here how well we know the Walmart case, the Walmart mass shooting case from August 3rd, 2019, and how well we know our son's case. Um, and it's so documented that for our son's case, that in January 24, so 4 days after President Trump took office, we received the in the line of duty designation for Richard, which was huge. So, because we know that he was murdered on Fort Bliss, and now it's in the line of duty, and that's now official. Murdered in the line of duty. So that really tells you there's only one possibility, and that's murder. There's no other possibility. It just debunked everything that the media and people that are part of this, are part of the cartel tied criminal trafficking organization, the thief, the contracts from the military industrial complex, and all of that, those people that profit off of this criminal activity, that they go on different platforms and spread lies. They absolutely have spread lies. And we have the truth. And the truth is, because our evidence, even it was our evidence that we gave them, um, and let them have, discuss it and determine through the evidence that they also have, that they withhold from us. They've withheld a lot of information from us. So, they absolutely, uh, honestly, determined the truth about Richard's situation. And so instead of, letting people just trust us, we've put out the evidence, and we've put out the confession. This was a notarized confession. It was an affidavit um, by Leilani Hart that was submitted on the 22nd of July, 2020 to the FBI. They kept that from us, even though she accused her husband, her husband too, her son, Richard's platoon leader, of the worst type of activity between father and son or brother and brother. Um, and uh, and also worst acts with children and unlawful purchasing of weapons and filming the worst type of acts against children and many more. Her immigration status, her illegal immigration status is in that. And we have posted parts of that because, it is so X-rated that we can't, just post it without it being taken down or us getting flagged. So we posted it once, the whole thing, but excerpts we can post up. But they kept that from us. The CID, the command, kept that from us. Richard, being a whistleblower, they kept from us, which has been absolutely confirmed. All the calls that he made and everything. Um, of course, his reports to Child Protective Services, to the FBI Houston, to Washington, D.C., to 911, to the CID, to IG. Um, absolutely. And the retaliation that they really unjustly, continuously, severely abuse their power to use a UCMJ against him, to destroy him in order to silence him. And when that didn't work, then and then they decided to murder him. And this is, all been documented. And the whole Nal Baim thing, being a Palestinian weapons um, trader, um, that was kept from us. And being like that, and that connection with a lieutenant colonel in the G3 of the 32nd ADCOM, which is Richard's command, is absolutely shocking. They didn't tell us that. Matter of fact, they lied to our face. We had to discover who Nadal Baim was and call him ourselves and everything, which when you know about his connections and everything, you say, oh my gosh, they put you in danger. Yeah, they absolutely put us in danger. So, and they didn't tell us about Judge Roger Rodriguez, him submitting his whistleblower report to multiple agencies, identifying Leilani Hart and CID, Tavita Nusa, former, because he's lost his badge, um, tampering with Richard's file and being the mother of Richard's platoon leader. They didn't even tell us. So, everything from the shaking to the crying to the keeping of everything that was happening in Richard's case, uh, that would expose the criminals, keeping that all from us, absolutely corroborates, and there's so much more, corroborates that Richard was murdered on Fort Bliss in the line of duty for being a whistleblower. And for being a whistleblower for the sake of really President Trump. And that's what I really want to talk about today is um, they weaponized a bloody mass shooting, okay? A bloody mass shooting in order to attack and subvert uh, President Trump and his administration, his border policies, um, and and of course his reelection. So they interfered with an election with a false narrative that has been confirmed a false narrative. The false narrative that they use with the Walmart case is that Patrick Crusius was a white supremacist, racist, lone shooter that randomly picked El Paso for its Hispanic population and came and did a deadly deed. That was the and is still being propagated. Every point in that has been debunked. Every point. Not that I, was saying, oh, blindly this has to be debunked. No, by Joe Spencer's own recorded words, by Loretta Lynn Hewitt, the prosecutor's own investigation and her own testimony in the hearings, by Patrick Crucius, uh, by the lack of a trial, by the lack of these criminals known as Judge Sam Madrano, Joe Spencer, Judge David Guadarrama, Stephen Spitzer, Jaime Esparza, Bill Hicks, Felix Valenzuela, Mark Stevens. Um, you can go down the whole James Montoya, Michael Mayella, um, Patrick's brother, Brian Blake Crucius, Alexis Mayella, his sister Emily Crucius, the parents, so you have a corroboration from even the neighbors that Patrick Crucius was and is autistic, severely autistic, that he has a severe mental health condition, schizio, whatever. I always forget how to say it. Um, and that he is, is very limited with his motor skills. And you can see it. You can see it when take off your um, the swirly glasses that the media put on us, the hypnosis. When you take that off and you just really analyze him, you can see what they've done, with the long hair now and the jail outfit that they've dressed him up to look as bad as they can. It looks like they starved him. He's lost so much weight. And he's talking to walls and yet they did not signing Patsy. I mean, God has such a way of telling us, right? That's a sign from God, right? That's a sign from God signing Pat C on his application for appointed counsel to get the open checkbook for Joe Spencer because he didn't want to earn nickels and dimes. It wasn't enough, that he has his law firm that is the contract to collect on anybody that doesn't pay their taxes, right? You got to pay your taxes for this garbage, for this criminal group, and if you don't, they're going to come after you, and it's going to be Joe Spencer's. You can't make this stuff up anyway. But Patsy, he signed that way. You can see that his motor skills are lacking, um, and so you know the narratives about the Walmart mass shooting, that he was a lone shooter. We know that. I'm going to post it up. There is so much witness testimony and evidence that shows that there's multiple shooters. I worked on it today. Thank you so much for the help out there. You would not believe all the witness testimonies. And all the evidence that absolutely confirms there's multiple shooters, plus the forensics of everything, the type of weapon, the only having one magazine. He only had one magazine, that's 30 bullets. If the magazine was full, maybe the magazine wasn't full. Maybe it was less than 30 bullets. There's been this discussion, right? If the magazine was full. So he only had one. He would need to have at least three if he was a good shooter, right? He would have to have 90 compared to all of the witness testimony, the missed shots, the the moving targets, the uh, outside hits, the inside hits, the you know, everything that was going on. You'd need at least 90 shots, right? 90. He only had at the most 30, and with that, 23 were um, lost their lives, 22 injured, and some of those were double hits. That was another part of the forensics. And to do that in less than 2 minutes and be afraid of blood and not have anything on you and not have any, being having a clean shirt and not even puking and clean pants and clean shoes and then surrendering twice to a Hispanic officer, showing that he was not a racist, in court, saying, "No, I'm not a racist," to Joe Spencer. I'm not into racism. And then his family, being with the Mayellas, come on, uh, being in Texas, being in San Antonio. He was living in San Antonio. There's so many Hispanic people in San Antonio, right? He didn't need to come over to El Paso, but we heard that he was living in Dallas, right? That he was from Dallas. But his apartment was in San Antonio, right? So, who he was living with was in San Antonio. It, so all the evidence shows that the narrative, everything that they said, that he was a lone shooter, is wrong, that he was racist, that's wrong, that he randomly picked El Paso like he had no Mayella ties here, no, is wrong. Everything that they were telling us was wrong. Why? Why would they lie about everything? Why would they fabricate this kind of narrative? And you can say, oh, they wanted to divide the people, right? They wanted to really trigger Hispanics, even though a German was killed, even though other Americans were killed. It doesn't, uh, you know, um, um, all kinds of people were injured in this, right? But they wanted to trigger, they wanted to fabricate and frame a narrative. And that was to affect the politics in the area, because the politics is worth millions and billions, literally worth millions and billions. Okay. And they they didn't want President Trump, because look at what President Trump is doing right now. He just turned off the NPR, the PBS. That, uh, that was very, very good news for El Paso, because that would be Angela Kachurga. Angela Kachurga is a big fat liar. And she, presents herself with all these award, like, I'm an award winning because I care about Hispanic women. But wait a minute, you got all this human trafficking, and most of those human trafficking are Hispanic women. So she doesn't care. She doesn't care. This is all politics. It's all about the Benjamins, y'all. It is all about the millions and billions to keep their criminal trafficking going. And because if she cared, she would have been reporting on the emergency intake center. All those young people, I think now it's been reported out of hundreds of thousands that 5,000 have been found. Most of them are dead. Most of them are dead. And this 10,000 at a time, 10,000 at a time, hundreds of thousands of children from months, I think 3 years old is the youngest that they've said. Maybe there's a younger, but up to 17 years old. And there's all kinds of purposes for the mistreatment of this young age group. And you see what happened to Richard. They don't care about our young people, right? They just don't care about humans. They're inhumane. They care about their criminal trafficking network that includes substances, weapons, and equipment, and humans and children, and films, the illegal type of films, um, and the worst type of crimes you can think of. And so to have the end of the PBS and the NPR, because those were weaponized to be hypnotic with falsehoods, to hypnotize the public with this false narrative, especially of the Walmart mass shooting. And of course, our son's case, that has been like so much false right from the very beginning, which was also odd for me because I'm like, what the heck are you doing? Saying that what are you doing? He's missing. Just, I don't care what you say, just where is he? Because we can go off together and we can rally. He can rally. He's young, just find him. But they knew all the time that he had been murdered on Fort Bliss in the line of duty. They knew all along, and they were shaking, and they were forming a smear campaign, and a false narrative surrounding our son. And why did they do that? Because their number one target was the 2020 campaign, the presidential campaign, and their target to attack was President Trump. They wanted anybody but him. They wanted Beto O'Rourke, right? They wanted Beto O'Rourke for that area, and so you see when the Walmart came out, it was Beto O'Rourke, and it was Chris Cuomo, and it was Veronica Escobar that came in. They already had it day one, El Paso Strong. They had already, this was orchestrated, it's very clear. And uh, the system used the military and, of course, the criminal judicial system and the media. It's a $1 billion network, criminal trafficking is, and the contracts and everything is just millions and billions. And so they did whatever they could to, um, do this bloody, bloody thing, um, and attack, frame the narrative to attack President Trump. And Richard was on the side of truth, right? He was on the side of the children. He was on the side of our military. He was on the side of the um, the ethics, right? The um, esprit de corps. He wanted esprit de corps. He wanted to be trained by the best BCID to stop crime, right? That's what he wanted. He was the Medal of Honor ethos. That's what he wanted. He yearned for that. And you see that when you look at his letter that he wrote his grandparents. You see that with his performance, being the Distinguished Honor Graduate for his cycles and basic training and AIT. You see that when he did Combat Lifesaver and 3 AAMs in 14 months, and in his whistleblowing, you see that. And that is all. And you see that by looking at the retaliation that they lodged against him, and none of it stuck. None of it stuck. They tried to entrap him, and let me tell you, they are absolutely pros at entrapping our young um, sons and daughters. They bring in the substances, they bring in the young girls, even the underage girls. That makes it even happier for them because they can film it. And then if they want to be a whistleblower, they can just blackmail them with these films of underage girls. They bring in the alcohol, they bring in, remember the the defector that defected to Russia, that was trained in El Paso on Fort Bliss. And he said for 2 years he stayed drunk, right? That is poor leadership for any young soldier to say that he stayed drunk. And he's not the only one. I heard that constantly while we were on the corners of El Paso and all around Fort Bliss and speaking to people. There was a real problem with terrible, terrible leadership. And you think, how can the leadership be so terrible? Well, because now we know now they intentionally did that to set up our young sons and daughters. They intentionally did that so that they can criminal trafficking, get their contracts unlawfully, um, and keep this gravy train, this criminal gravy train going, and be able to damage control if anyone wanted to be a whistleblower, right? That they could compromise our soldiers, and they would shut up, right? There's no better way to compromise soldiers than to make them criminals somehow, illegal weapons, substance abuse, underage drinking. We take that so seriously. You're going to get 6 years, 6 years. I told them, stick it in your ear, really. I didn't say that, but I wanted to, I thought it. I thought it, and because I knew they were lying, and it was just the most ridiculous argument for anything when you have a murdered soldier, um, young murdered soldier. Yeah, so it, it is really obvious that Lieutenant General Sean Bernabe was in on this mutiny against President Trump, to target President Trump so that he could keep whatever criminal activity that he was in on in the El Paso area going. Okay, with Cardona and Leilani Hart, because Cardona and Leilani Hart were, very connected. With Rosa Maria Valdez Garcia, and Danae Katzen and Jonathan Ambrose and Brian Blake Crucius and Michael G. Mayella and Jaime Esparra and Veronica Escobar and all of them. So they were absolutely committing treason. They were absolutely, by committing mutiny, to put forth a plan, and um, 45 people, so 23 died. I count 24 because of Glennon Oakley Jr. Absolutely, he was um, part of this totally, and rest in peace, Glendon, and and then 22 injured. Uh, yeah, can you imagine? And then Richard losing his life, that makes it 2025, right? And then let's talk about Asia Graham too, because of the more concern for his his own personal gain than the soldiers. So he absolutely, and committing this treason, this mutiny against President Trump, the commander in chief. So they didn't like President Trump's border policies, his anti-war policies, and he was the target. And they really went to the whole extremes. Um, and there's reasons for that too. That's going to come out. Um, why they did this, and why Jaime got called over there by his sister and all of that. But the main point is that General Garrett absolutely was in on this, and of course, um, David Stewart, and that's why they gave him a second star, and that's why they gave Sean Bernabe a third star, because we have uh, it goes to Congress. It goes to Congress. This evil, evil mutiny, this evil treason. The people are just absolute traitors for personal gain. And you know what is so true in all of this, right? Is that these are miserable people. You know, they think that if they have this kind of money or whatever, that that will buy them happiness. They're chasing the dollar for happiness, and it never works. It never works. It can really bring you some misery. Um, so, it's really sweet to see the Kentucky Derby sovereignty beating journalism, right? Sovereignty beating journalism. That was pretty sweet, because we know that our happiness comes only if you seek God, right? If you seek God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost. And that's why they attack that so much, right? They attack you. They don't want you to be happy. They want you to try to always run after the Benjamin, the money, and it just brings misery, right? So, yeah, and that's why when they try to frame things around us, and our friends were like, "What? They don't know you very well." I'm like, I know. They're just obvious liars, but they have access. They have access to VA files. They have access to CID files. They have access to FBI files. They have access to military files. I mean, they have access, right? And they have online access um, to your life, and they use that, and we can absolutely testify that they use that. Um, they can weaponize it against you, and try to threaten you, try to intimidate you. Um, so the main point is, uh, and this is probably my number one point for supporting President Trump, is he must be very, very clean. He must be very sparkling clean for someone with his financials and having audits. The last in 2015, he was audited 10 times. So I can't even imagine what they've done in the last 10 years, right? Um, and his audits are huge, huge, because his financials are huge. And, going through being a billionaire, he's pretty clean. I'm not saying he's very clean. I'm not saying, but he is really clean. To get through all of this, to become president again, it's just really amazing. And I have to tell you, Richard is sparkling clean. Um, uh, it's just for him. Um, that was for them um, a real risk, and that's why they murdered him, because he wasn't compromised with the girls. He wasn't compromised with um, the drugs and with the filming and everything, because they would have absolutely plastered that everywhere. They couldn't even plaster the film that they did have of him, because it's just so wonderful. I rather burn my money than spend it on whores and blow. Let them plaster that everywhere, right? But they didn't want to do that. They didn't mention it, right? They didn't want to mention it, because it just shows you his amazing character, wonderful character, his uncompromised character. And so, and I know from talking to other people that met him, uh, all of them, not one, not one, um, had a bad remark about Richard. And so, really, really proud of him. And what is that? what do I want to say? Well, we absolutely, these leaders that intentionally entrap and put stumbling blocks in front of our children, our young children that are, kind of naive and or look on their leadership as examples and everything and role models, and that they intentionally bring in the girls during the lockdown, these underage girls, and they have substances that are illegal, and they encourage a party and they encourage a grog party out in the field, um and encourage the lack of discipline, encourage sex cults, encourage um the worst of the worst of the worst, y'all. It's just so bad. Instead of being war fighters, instead of having discipline, instead of having ethics and the Medal of Honor ethos and the esprit de corps, having the esprit de corps, um, they need to be held accountable for their intentional destruction of our military in order to attack their commander in chief. That's what Major General David Stewart did. That's what Lieutenant General Sean Bernabe did. And that's what Garrett did. And they have, I want to let you know, they have supporters also, because at that level it becomes very political, and they have their little groups, and those groups, they go out and I know this from my dad. My dad would, I don't want to call it a spy, but my dad, for his general, would be in with the troops. And of course, my dad was an NCO, and the troops would readily talk to him rather than an officer. And so my dad would report to the general on the condition of the troops, their um, what they were talking about, what they were concerned about, what they, to make them stronger, to make them um, uh, more cohesive. Um, but now these groups surrounding General Garrett, surrounding Bernabe, like Kyla Cardona, like Eric Johnson, Eric I Love Crack Johnson, like Leilani Hart, um, you know, because, and there's, Clem Coward and all that. Anyway, um, uh, and the group surrounding David Stewart, they all have their little bees that surround them. And, we absolutely understand that now. Um, and but they don't mean good. No, they're bees for this criminal trafficking um, contract goals. That is their goal. That is their end. And so when you see a lot of mental health problems in the military, when you see a lot of drug problems, I cannot tell you how many people I've spoke to, and they have their son, their daughter joins, and when they get out, they are a mess. They are a total mess, and they call it PTSD or whatever. But a lot of times it's from other reasons, not combat reasons. It's for other reasons. And so this intentional um, harm, I'm thinking about Elder Fernandez on this one, um, the intentional harm that they've done physically and mentally on our troops, that is unnecessary. That is unnecessary. absolutely confirms, is evidence. The proof is in the pudding, is evidence that they were up to no good. And Fort Bliss is called a death camp. A death camp. They need to shut down Fort Bliss. And I know that we have a new commander in chief. I know Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has gone there. And I hope that he has said, "Oh, watch out, get ready. We need to shut you down." I hope so. Because they need to shut down Fort Bliss. I really, from everything that I know, they need to. It is, it's just too lucrative for the cartel, and they will get their snakes in there. They will get their snakes in our uniforms with our stars and in our Congress. It's just too close to that border, too close to that very well developed cartel tied criminal network. When they can get their snakes inside of the DA's office, inside of the medical examiner's office, inside of the federal courthouse, inside of the El Paso criminal law justice court, when they can get their snakes inside of the representatives' offices, when they can get their snakes in the law offices, when they can get their snakes in the HR, right? When they can get their snakes into FIPFAM and El Paso Matters, and when they can get their snakes into EPIC, our El Paso intelligence community, when they can get their snakes in there, in our military, in our motor pools, in our barracks, when they can get their snakes in there um, so easily, like they've done, Fort Bliss needs to be shut down. It needs to be shut down. And it's an ancient city. It has so much potential. It will do so much better. It will do so much better. Just look at the failure, what they have done to that city when you look at old postcards and old pictures and how that, Juarez used to be amazing, absolutely amazing. And we used to go over there all the time, and it was even better earlier than that with the streetcar going right over there, right over the bridge. Um, and the people were so much happier on the Mexico side, so much happier on the Texas side, and so much wealthier because what's wealth, right? What is wealth? And, to have the examples of Sam Madrano and Joe Spencer and Sean Bernabe, and I mean, they are examples of why it needs to be shut down. And they organize themselves to affect an election, to claw it, and they did do it. And 5 were murdered, and 22 were injured. That's how they value their criminal network over humanity, over their own country. And then all the fraud that went with it. Millions and millions of dollars for the Patrick Crucius case. Millions, y'all. And I know millions for Richards. So they need to be held accountable for what they did, for this mutiny against President Trump. Clearly a mutiny. Evidence confirms it was a mutiny. And they used the criminal judicial system in El Paso and the media to help them. Clearly, evidence confirms it. It's not me. Don't even, I'm just saying, look, go look at the evidence. Look at the evidence. It confirms it. And what are they going to do now? President Trump, the very first day he got in office, confirmed it by designating the Sinaloa cartel as a T organization, the big T organization. That confirms he knows. Pete Hegseth's first stop was Fort Bliss. They know. That confirms it. Our communications, absolutely, they know. It confirms it. 4 days after President Trump took his oath, this time around, Richard gets in the line of duty. That confirms it. They know. They know that Richard was in communication and his testimony would absolutely change the whole narrative of the Walmart mass shooting. That's why Danae Katzen went after us, was in possession of Richard's credit cards after his time of death. It confirms it. That's why Nadal Bayim went shh about Richard's partial body remains being in Mexico. That's why there were so many operatives trying to mislead us. That's why they hid Judge Rodriguez's whistleblower report that identified Leilani Hart, which then identified CID Tavita Nusa, which then identified the confession. The confession that she spread around. And that she had the FBI number for it. Because she had access. And that's why she spread it around. It was like, see how powerful I am. I have access. So that confirms it. And there's so much more. So thank you so much. And I hope that you will look at the evidence. And those that have been watching from the very beginning, I don't even think I have to convince any of you. And let me read some of these because I'm just talking away. Okay. Could the weapon be handed to him? What was the reason he was at Walmart? Well, Pat C, to me, and I don't know, this is me just speculating, because of working with months with severely autistic children. They're so inside themselves that you can manipulate them very easily, right? But that they're very reactive with any kind of noise. That's why he had to wear the tactical earmuffs, right? The electronic earmuffs. That was a big deal, right? Because someone might have been talking to him to calm him down, but he couldn't stay in there very long. And I don't even know when they took that picture of him because they had so much control. When did they take him there? When did he have a picture? Was he there? I mean, we there was no evidence presented. There was no trial, right? So everything is speculative, except for the hard evidence. We know the timing, 10:39. We know that he couldn't fathom killing more than one or two, which tells you, uh, he was there. He did surrender twice. The last time being at 11:06. He did surrender absolutely clean and absolutely calm. Now that raises all kinds of flags for me because when you have that kind of noise, screaming, and, shots fired and headshots and body parts going and fluids going and all of that, I think he would have been a mess unless he was very, very highly medicated, right? But so there's a lot of questions. And we know that he is part of this group. So, but he's a patsy. He's a patsy. I'm not saying he's totally innocent, but I, without we need to hear the evidence. And now they've closed the cases, um, because this court was rigged. This wasn't a random judge. Um, Joe Spencer wasn't a random defense attorney assigned. You know, um, Judge Guadarrama wasn't just a random judge. No, they they were all look at Steven Spitzer, on the federal prosecuting, having this personal relationship with the Mayellas, and them planning weddings um, and they were bold about it. They took pictures about it and everything, right? So people knew. I wonder if he went to the wedding. Yeah, he was absolutely, and he turned 21, and a lot of times the funding for handicap individuals runs out, you know, at 21. Did they just want to institutionalize and have the taxpayers pay it? Right? I guess they got their wish. He's in the hands of Texas now. Um, Leadership wearing the doggy mask. Oh gosh, I know so much, and yep, you're absolutely right. I still have that. The whole earmuffs thing is that's also that where did that go? Was it in the car, and how did they do the weapon? And his arrest was so odd, right? It was so odd. I mean, you're talking about a huge, I think it's the biggest mass shooting, and they didn't even bag his hands. Are you kidding me? They didn't read his Miranda rights. They didn't have all kind of backup. I mean, it was so weird. It was so weird. Um, I know what a patsy is. Yeah. Someone may have instructed him. Do they have? I mean, it amazes me. I didn't say it to make sure that you got it. I said it because it just amazes me that he signed his name Patsy. It's I just, uh, I'm going through all the paperwork and everything, and I'm like Patsy, and then I have all this evidence. We're talking about it, and we're like, oh my gosh, Patsy, and then of course we had to write the song. Um, they didn't tell us. They didn't tell us. They didn't tell us here. That's our discussions here is they didn't tell us that Patsy has autism, that he failed kindergarten, that he couldn't tie his shoes when he was 18, that he couldn't speak until he was almost 6, um, that his brother is marrying a Mayella. They didn't tell us this, you know. So that was the ground for that song, to put that song together. Um, watch the movie 13th, okay, on Netflix. Did he always use that signature? Yeah, that's a good question, you know. And he has school records. He has a lot of school records. I know because when I was teaching in special ed, you had to write down everything every day. You had to write down everything every day. And when I taught school, I had to write down everything every day. You have to keep a journal as a teacher. So they absolutely have records on him. And they're keeping that from us, right? So all of that is open record now. We need to have it. And I think that they're going to try to seal, like they did the JFK stuff. They're going to try to seal um, because the evidence, it's clear. Even just the outside hard evidence that we know, it makes it clear that the narrative that they fed us, that they keep feeding us, is absolutely false. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You would be absolutely in a panic. Um, sp- and especially surrendering twice, and that's not me saying that. That's Joe Spencer. That's Joe Spencer recorded, and I released that. Um, and there's other witness information about that. So, yeah. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much, and we'll just keep going. But this was absolutely political. That's my point. And this was, um, when you're in the military, the president of the United States is your commander in chief. And my husband, over 30 years, my dad, over 23 years, of course, Richard. And when you have your commander in chief, it doesn't matter if you're on the right side, the left side, whatever, he is your commander in chief. And what our military leadership did was treasonous. Yeah. And they used a Walmart mass shooting. And I think it even gets more. But yeah. And I can come on a live stream and tell you that with confidence because that's what the evidence confirms. So thank you so much. God bless you. And I will be back tomorrow.